Hello everyone and welcome to my video. I'm Nukarval and today I'm showing you a different deck profile of a deck I built myself and I hope you will enjoy it. And yeah, let's just check it out. And it will be just simple. I won't show you a combo video because it isn't really a combo deck at all. So I will just show you what it's built of and yeah, what you maybe have to pay attention to a bit more. So, yeah, this of course has this deck has the strategy to just deck out your opponent as fast as you can, and yeah, that's actually it. So it's just to kind of troll your opponent a bit. So for that we have Lilith, Lady of Lament, and yeah, this card can tribute itself or a different dark type monster you control you have on the field, and yeah, you reveal 3 traps from your deck to your opponent, shuffle them, and then your opponent chooses one of them randomly that is set to your deck, and the other 2 are shuffled back into the deck. So pretty easy. Yeah, its original attack become 1000 when it is normal summoned, which is usually the case, and its effect is a quick effect, so you can kinda avoid infinite impermanence or effect trailer with it. And the tributing is cost. Then, so we will run 3 copies of it. Then 1 copy of Morphing Jar, because it is still limited. Yeah, both players, if it is flipped face up, no matter how, yeah, it causes both players to discard their whole hand, and here both players draw 5 new cards. So it is great if you especially have like only, I don't know, 1 card or such maybe, or even no cards at all in your hand. And yeah, it gives you more resources and gets rid of your opponent's resources. So it's quite nice. But of course, a flip effect monster is a bit slow, but this one is still worth it in my opinion. Then we have 1 Day of Peace. Both players draw a card and none of the players take any damage anymore for the rest of this turn and the next turn. Then Card of Demise, also limited, 1 copy. Yeah, you can draw cards you can draw cards up to 3 until you have 3 cards in your hand. And for the rest of this turn, after this card resolves, your opponent takes no damage, and during the end phase of this turn, you send your entire hand to the graveyard. So you try to have an empty hand at the end of the turn, but sometimes you can prevent it. Also, you can't special summon during the turn you activate this card. But yeah, when do you actually special summon? It's pretty rare, but sometimes. Then, of course, maybe the main topic of this card of this deck, card destruction. Too bad for the opponent. Yeah, because yeah, both players discard as many hands from the hand as possible, and each player draws the same amount they discarded by this effect. And this actually bypasses the clause that your opponent has to have enough cards at the card's activation to draw. And yeah, sorry about my phone. Yeah, actually, it can be quite funny because you can cause your opponent to lose after this when this card resolves. Then we have Terraforming. Yeah, it searches a field spell from a deck to your hand, also limited. Then we have some cards from the Runic engine, which I had to include. I didn't want to run a whole engine of it. I just want to use a few cards that are very good for this deck, and that is Runic Golden Droplet. This card has 2 effects. Like, yeah, all quick spells of Runic have the same effect that you can special summon one Runic monster from an extra deck to the extra monster zone, and that you have when you activate one of those effects, that you have to skip your next battle phase. In this deck, you don't really use your battle phase, so no need to worry about that. And this card, the special effect is your opponent draws 1 card and then banishes the top 4 cards of their deck. And That is very great. You get rid of basically 5 cards from the deck just in one card, and the draw can be useful, which I will show you later on. Sadly, the draw isn't the last thing to happen, but still it's great. Then we have Runic Tip. Its own effect is that you can add one runic card from your deck to your hand, except for itself, and then your opponent banishes the top card of their deck. Then also 3 copies of that, and Runic Droplet, Golden Droplet of course. Then we have Book of Eclipse, which is also great. All monsters on the field are changed to face down defense position, and during the end phase your opponent of this turn, your opponent changes as many more face down monsters he controls to face up defense position, and each monster that is flipped face up by this effect cause their opponent to draw 1 card each. So for each monster he flips up, he draws 1 card. And drawing in this deck is quite good. Then we have Runic Fountain, which is semi-limited, so we play 2 copies of it. And its effect is, if we can, well, the first effect is we can activate runic quick spells from our hand during our opponent's turn as well. So yeah, it's kind of like having hand traps. And also, if we activate a runic quick play spell, then we can target up to after it resolved. Then we can target up to 3 runic quick play spells. Doesn't have to be different ones, by the way, and place them on the bottom of our deck in the order we want to, and then draw the same amount of cards we put on the bottom of the deck. So up to 3, which is quite good as a draw engine and to refill our resources. So very great. And funnier, this card is, its draw effect isn't even a hard once per turn. So if you have a second copy in your hand, and then you can activate it, and activate a runic quick play spell, and then again draw cards like that. Which is quite funny in my opinion, but yeah, it also came up yet. Well, it doesn't come up that often. Then we have the Gift of Greed. Simple effect, your opponent draws 2 cards. Yeah, normally you wouldn't play such a card, but this deck likes this effect a lot. Because your opponent should have as many cards as possible, so we have 2 copies of that, and they should have that many cards, so we can really take advantage of Trickster Reincarnation. Your opponent banishes their entire hand and has to draw the same amount of cards. So that is quite a lot, and it is once per turn, so you can let your opponent banish and draw so many cards. I had turns at which my opponent had to banish and draw 11 cards. So yeah, that is quite fast mill like that, or banish emptying out their deck. Then we have that means 3 copies of Trickster Reincarnation, of course. Next we have 3 copies of side effects. Your opponent chooses a number from 1 to 3. He has to draw that many cards, and you gain the same amount of life points times 2000. And yeah, sadly the effect of gaining life points is the last part that happens. So yeah, but otherwise it's still great. Then again, 3 copies of present cards. Sadly this one is hard once per turn, but still it's great. Your opponent discards their entire hand and draws 5 cards, no matter how many cards they had before. So if your opponent, for example, had 11 cards, then they will have less cards than before, which is quite useful. Then we have 1 copy of Metaverse. I know I can't play more, but it can become bricky otherwise. So yeah, you target one. You can take 1 field spell from your deck and either activate it or add it to your hand. So it can be ashed even if you would instead activate it, because you have the choice to do either of them and you don't choose before it resolves. Then an important card, Appropriate. This card says, yeah, if your opponent draws cards outside their draw phase, then when your opponent draws outside their draw phase, then you can activate this card, and from then on, each time your opponent draws a card outside the draw phase, you immediately draw 2 cards for each effect. And funny enough, this the draw effect of this card doesn't start a chain, so you always draw. Your opponent cannot respond to it anymore after that. And one tip I would give you: you shouldn't really have one. You only should have one of this card on the field, active on the field. So you shouldn't have 2 or 3 face-up copies of it. Otherwise, you can risk decking yourself out. And important is, if you want to activate this card, the last thing that happened must have been that your opponent drew cards. So yeah, that's a bit the little disadvantage, but it can be quite good, especially compared with, combined with Runic Engine, because Runic Droplet lets your opponent draw. That means you can also draw with Appropriate, regain some resources, and also you can banish. You can put runic spells on the bottom of your deck thanks to Runic Fountain and draw again. That means you can kind of have a full back row at the end of your turn, even when you had less cards. Then we have Dark Bribe. It can negate a spell or trap your opponent activates, which is quite good, of course, to save your back row a bit. And then, most important, your opponent draws 1 card, which again triggers Appropriate. Then we have Recall. So we have both we have 2 copies. Recall is kind of like Dark Bribe, but instead of spell and traps, it negates monster effects. So also again, your opponent draws 1 card, and you destroy the monster as well. So yeah. Then we have Waboku. And this one is very funny in combination with Morphing Jar and Book of Eclipse, because on this turn you don't take battle damage, and your monsters cannot be destroyed by battle on this turn as well. So if your opponent, for example, declares an attack on Morphing Jar, you can then activate Waboku to keep it safe from that battle, and have your opponent have the effect still trigger. It stays on the field, and after that you can activate Book of Eclipse to flip it face down, back face down, so it can trigger again. So quite funny. Very important in this deck is that you should know how to set the chains. So you can say, okay, if your opponent has 5 cards, you should know that you should probably activate Trickster Reincarnation first as chain link 1 and Gift of Greed as chain link 2. That way your opponent draws 2 cards first because it is chain link 2, and then chain link 1 resolves, Trickster Reincarnation causing your opponent to then banish 7 instead of 5 cards only. That means you get rid of more cards. And also important that you have to look at the rule. And the rule is, your opponent can only activate a card if your opponent would have enough cards to draw when only this card would resolve. So let's say your opponent has 7 cards in their hand but only 6 cards in their deck. Then you couldn't activate Trickster Reincarnation. But if your opponent has 5 cards in their deck and you activate or 6 cards in your deck in their deck, then you can activate Present card as chain link 1, or let's say Trickster Reincarnation is chain link 1, and Present card as chain link 2. That means your opponent has to discard his hand, draw 5. That means 1 card is left in the deck. Then he discards his hand and has to banish his hand thanks to Trickster Reincarnation, and draw the same amount again. but since he can't draw enough cards, he loses immediately. If your opponent just has to banish cards instead, and doesn't have to draw while he can't draw anymore, then your opponent doesn't lose. So your opponent, unless they have to draw on the next draw phase then, and don't have any cards anymore in their deck. But yeah, so you have to make sure that your opponent, that you can activate your cards and get rid of as many cards as possible on your opponent's deck, and maybe even deck them out before the next draw phase. Also important is, like I said, try to not have more than one copy of appropriate face up on the field, so you won't deck yourself out. And yeah, that's actually it. Then on the extra deck you can play whatever you feel like, though I would recommend you to have Huggin on the Runic Winds, the Runic Wings on your deck, on your extra deck, so you can search your field spell with it. And also, yeah, you can, if another card you control would be destroyed by a card effect, you can also banish this card you control instead, which can also help you to protect your fountain or your back row if needed. The other cards aren't that important, but they could be good if you could have, if you would have some Dogmatica targets, for example. Like if they activate, I think Maximus was it, that also costs you to send cards from your extra deck to the graveyard, then you can take advantage of that. It's better than having nothing useful in your extra deck. But yeah, so stuff like Elder Entity Natis would be great, or like if Tri-Brigade Ferrigit, the Baron Blossom, for example, is also useful. And yeah, maybe stuff like Garura, I think was its name. And yeah, so that would be cards that could be useful. Or also even Omega could be useful to return some cards from your graveyard. But other than that, yeah, it's not very important. And that's how I would play the deck. So as see, there isn't much of a combo, but it can be a fun little deck that can surprise your opponent. And yeah, I also played this deck on one video on my channel if you want to see it. I had a very funny match against Metaphyss, I think was its name, that deck, and yeah, we kinda had the same goal and it ended up quite funny. So if you want to see this deck in action, just check it out, or maybe on one of my community streams I can show you how to play it, or I can also play it against you if you want to. And yeah, that's it. So thanks for watching, I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, then please like and subscribe. Also check out my playthroughs on my channel if you want to watch more. In the description you'll find a link to Twitch where you can watch me stream live, and 2 links to Straw Poll where you can vote for the next games I'll play on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. So I hope to see you next time again, have a great time, bye bye.